Avengers Age of Ultron is garbage, folks.
Is it an alligator or a crocodile? I don't know the difference, and at this point I'm too afraid to ask.
Look at that. That is a werewolf, folks.
Hi, and welcome to Marvel Standom, where we like to dig into the world of Marvel Comics, the MCU, and sometimes even weird Marvel stuff from the past. I'm your host, Den of Geek News and Features Editor Kirsten Howard, and joining me live this week are Den of Geek TV Editor Alec Bajalid, pop culture writer and Den of Geek contributor Joe George, and we're also blessed to have none other than Den of Geek contributor and pop culture writer Tom Chapman in the house. Thank you, Tom, for joining us to talk about the third episode of Secret Invasion, which had a few twists and turns. We'll have a chat about it in a moment. Before that, Tom, can you tell us a bit about your background?
Yes, so I'm a huge Marvel fan, sort of remember growing up on a diet of sort of Jurassic Park, things like that. Me and my dad always went to see the Bond movies at the cinema. And then as soon as the MCU came out, watched them all the way through. Every show, everything, which is a lot to keep up on. But yeah, I've been writing now about it probably for about 6 years. Lived in Berlin, wrote about it there, and now it's kind of my bread and butter, freelancing about on the side.
What have been your favourite MCU things so we can get a grip with your vibe and what you prefer and perhaps don't like as much?
I love Thor Ragnarok. I think for me, that is top tier. Kate Blanchett in that, one of the best Marvel villains. But then I guess on the flip side of that, you look at something like Love and Thunder, which I'm definitely not a fan of. Loki, loved Loki, and WandaVision. Yeah, I kind of like the sort of the mythological, more sort of out there ones than the grounded ones. Was not a fan of Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I think that's fair enough. I'm just going to do a little recap of Secret Invasion episode 3, just to jog anyone's memories who is listening to this on our podcast. In the third episode of Marvel's Secret Invasion, Gravik sets up Gaia to out her as a mole and then seemingly kills her, while Nick and Talos play right into his trap by trying to thwart a Skrull attack on a UN plane, blowing Gaia's cover in the process. And Rhodey is a Skrull, I guess, which I think everyone saw coming, but perhaps not. Tom, I'm going to start with you. How have you found the series so far? Also, what did you think of this episode particularly?
Yeah, I think in terms of how Marvel series go, it's definitely a slow burner. I think what you need to remember as well is we're 3 episodes in now, and I feel that at a halfway point, it's maybe not quite had that massive moment, which sounds ridiculous because every episode's ended on a huge cliffhanger, a big reveal, basically. I like the groundedness of it. I like the sort of the homey Earth adventure, get to see more of Nick Fury, because obviously we've known him since the first Iron Man, and yet, I think I wrote about it last week, we know nothing about him other than how he likes his toast, and then even that doesn't add up. But I think in terms of big reveals and stuff, yeah, it's that thing where they have you coming back every week. But I think sometimes maybe you kind of want to fast forward to the end and be like, right, who's a Skrull this week? Who's going to get shot? Who are we not seeing again? And then all the theories that come with it. And I think sometimes some of the middle bits get a bit slow.
Okay, so how did you find this particular episode? Has this been your one of them so far, or would you say they've kind of maintained equilibrium?
For me, I think episode 2, just for the Sonya Falsworth scene alone, for me is the one that clinches it. I could watch a whole spin-off with just Olivia Colman and just running this sort of branch of British superheroes. Episode 2 was a solid one. This one was good. It's good to find more about his wife. I think she'll become a much more interesting character. And as for the whole Emilia Clarke thing, I think that they've done an okay job with her so far as Gaia. But I think personally, obviously without, I imagine we're going to get onto it in a minute. I think they could do a lot more with her moving forward. And I think her character could become more exciting.
Oh, what do you mean, Tom? She's dead. No, we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
Alex, what did you think of episode 3? Because you've not been enamored with the show so far, but you did prefer the second episode to the first one.
Yeah, and I remain not enamored with it, but I do think it's getting a little better week by week, and it's getting a little better at bringing some interesting novel things to the table. Like this week, the Talos and Fury relationship gets better and funnier and just kind of more interesting. My favorite thing on this show is every single character that speaks in a British accent for some reason. Like, I'm not that fascinated with Fury. I'm not that fascinated with any of the rank and file scrolls, but like Olivia Colman still rules. Talos is getting better and better. And then our friend Kingsley Ben-Adir is like weirdly excellent in a not that great show. I still think like nothing really like truly impresses me or like blows me away about it. And I think that they could be doing a lot of things better. And I might be biased because hearing anybody compare this before it came out to Marvel's Andor really got my ire up. And it's hard for me to move past that anytime they do something really conventionally Marvel on screen. Like, oh, Marvel's Andor at it again. So that's made it challenging for me. I think it's a perfectly fine Marvel show. I'm not cranky about anybody enjoying it now. Let me put it that way. If you're vibing with it, I'll allow it.
Alec, I've got to break it to you, and you might want to brace yourself, but Ben Mendelsohn is Australian.
Yeah, but isn't he doing a British accent? Like it's like a weird like chimney. Like, all right, fine. They just let him walk around doing an Australian accent?
Yes.
That's unacceptable.
Joe, what did you think of this episode? And how have you been finding the series so far? I feel like you've been on one of these episodes already, and
I was on one. I did not have anything memorable to say. I'm enjoying the show. I really am. But I don't know what this show kind of is. Like I think Alex right. I mean, he's completely right that it's not Andor at all, because it gestures at real world complex ideas. This is never going to get to a conversation about resisting totalitarianism and fascism, in space that relates to what we are going through now. The show doesn't have the depth. It doesn't have the adroitness to do that. It occasionally gestures at real world issues, but I'm sure you guys touched on the conversation between Rhodey and Fury in the last episode, where it's bringing in heavy stuff about racism in the States, but then it kind of doesn't really do anything with them, which is fine because it's a show about super spies fighting space aliens. And so I don't need it to be about anything else. But then the stuff that's about super spies versus space aliens isn't that exciting either, because they're just walking around like people most of the time. And then it's not like there's no real tension to it. I don't know that the show knows what it is. I'm enjoying it because I love to watch Olivia Colman, and in this episode, I love to watch Ben Mendelsohn and Nick Fury and Samuel L. Jackson share scenes together. I mean, those guys are all a lot of fun to watch. I think it's a really good-looking show. I think this is the strongest cinematography of any of the Marvel shows so far. Like the bit where Fury's wife goes into the deposit boxes, that gold sheen that's behind them. That was really sharp. Yeah, the one that's on the screen right now. That's really good looking. There's a lot of interesting use of lighting here that I think is great, but I feel like really the show wants to be sort of a conspiracy thriller and sort of a political commentary, and it totally fails on both of those levels.
Well, tell us how you really feel, Joe.
That's all I got to say now. So I'm going to take the rest of the app off.
I just want to tag up and say real quick, like the whole Marvel's and thing, I think is something that was probably unfairly thrust upon the show. But like you said, Joe, you have to judge it on what it's going for, and what it seems to be going for is something in that conspiracy realm, some kind of spy thriller. And thinking about it on those merits, I'm hard pressed to think of anything new that it has brought to the spy genre, or anything old from the spy genre that it's executed at a particularly high level. this is a show that has beings in it that could change their appearance seemingly at will. And I just don't think they've really done anything with that. And I don't think they've done anything with any like interesting spy tactics or what have you. So trying to meet the show at its level and what it's going for, I think it still falls a little short, even if some of the character stuff is getting more interesting, and even if some of the cinematography is getting more interesting. I do love the scene that played heavily in the trailer of Talos lunging for Gravik and everybody immediately becoming their scroll. That was cool.
What I liked about that scene, it only showed us, Gravik sort of multiplying and Talos's reaction to it. Whereas in the episode, you get to see what happens next. He has Gravik by the balls, basically. He's got him in a chokehold. He stabs him through the hand. So he's not as intimidated as you would think. I will agree that this episode definitely has some of the best, if not the best, lighting and composition that I've seen in any of these shows and most of the movies, honestly. So whoever's behind the scenes here needs a raise and another job very quickly. Let's put them on a really good show, please, or a very good movie. But I thought this episode was a bit of a step up. No, it's still not a great show for me, but I did love the scenes where people were just kind of sitting around talking. That's when the show's been at its best, really, so far. And there was a lot of that in episode 3. Nick and Talos in the car talking was just one of the best sort of dialogue that we've seen in a while from the MCU, where they're talking about Talos is saying, everything that you've achieved in your life is thanks to me. And, you're not grateful enough and you haven't done enough. And Nick's sort of knows he's in the wrong and knows that Talos is right and that he owes him his life and probably his career, but is acting kind of like a petulant child. I love their relationship, and they're even more of an old married couple than Nick and his actual wife. And I really like to see it on screen. There's something quite romantic between them in a way that I'm enjoying. So I'd like to see more of that going forward. Do we buy into Nick and his wife and their history? Do you feel like they fleshed that out enough in this episode?
No.
Yeah, I would say no. I would also agree, Chris. Absolutely. Nick and Talos have more romantic chemistry than any other characters on screen. Like way back in episode 1, before, I don't know if this was established in Captain Marvel or not, but I didn't realize that the Skrull handshake is like tenderly touching foreheads. So when Fury came back to Earth and did that for like a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that Disney was absolutely letting Nick Fury and Talos have a romantic relationship. And I was so thrilled for like the 3 seconds before I came crashing back down to Earth and realized that they're just bros who touch foreheads sometimes.
They snipe at each other, but then they're so tender with each other. And I'm struggling to think of another relationship, in the MCU that is that intimate in a way. I don't know, there was quite a lot of chemistry between Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans in The Winter Soldier, and I think probably that's the closest we've got. There was a little bit of She-Hulk and Daredevil maybe, but that's more of a sexual thing. But these two are just like, it's the most believably in love I've seen two MCU characters be.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see Nick Fury's wife, like you say, the whole dynamic of like, have they fleshed out enough? And you think we've got that flashback scene to 1998. So you've got decades and decades where you assume that they've been married, maybe not happily, but in some form. And yeah, there's a chance to flesh it out with more flashbacks. But if we've only got 3 episodes left, I question how much time are they going to donate to that? And I also think it's the strange dynamic, like you don't really understand why he just sort of left her. I guess that's like a big plot point. And with the Marvels now probably looking like it's going to be a prequel to this, it'll probably be explained in that. But yeah, it's kind of just like she plays second fiddle to him no matter what. Like she is the wife of Nick Fury, and yet no one knew about her. So, but that's also a dynamic you can explore. She's sort of this woman that lives in the shadows of the shadowy man. And the fact that scene at the end where she's got the gun and she's in the vault and stuff, And I know in the trailers, it looks like she gets some more action to do. So yeah, I want to know what makes her tick, why she sort of stuck up with being him. I didn't get the impression that she's a weak woman at all, but why is she still sort of trodden down by the great Nick Fury?
I mean, yeah, I didn't really buy that he had left her for that long. I think it just seemed like a plot convenience of the MC.
Yeah.
Like, well, you were gone for 5 years in the blip and then you disappeared. And it's like, okay, so this is just some very convenient stuff. But back up a bit, Tom, because you think the Marvels might be a prequel to Secret Invasion. Now, I always you come to me and you have like 18 theories every week, and I always find them fascinating. So I don't think I've heard that this is a prequel. What makes you think it is?
So the fact that Kobe Smulders is apparently back in the Marvels, and I'm under no illusion that Maria Hill isn't dead and buried, or that they're going to even replace her with a Skrull, because I think if they hadn't had the scene with her mum and the funeral, you could have maybe gone ahead with Skrull Maria Hill, and that could have worked for however many years. But yeah, I think the fact that she's back, because originally I was like, yeah, Marvel's definitely a Secret Invasion sequel. But if Kobe Smulders is back, it makes me think it's a prequel. Plus, it can, timeline-wise, I think it just about works as well. But then it kind of makes you think, well, what's the point in watching the Marvels? Not that you shouldn't watch the Marvels, but if it's a prequel to this, then what's it bringing to the table in terms of Secret Invasion? And I think, yeah, it's just a bit of a convenient, no matter where you place it, it's a convenient plot thing. And I just think the MCU now, I said this as well. So Secret Invasion starts and it says present day, but it's not. It's set in 2025, which is our future. It's a mess of plot lines. It feels a bit like The Flash when he gets that spaghetti and dumps it out and he's like, here's our timeline, go.
Oh, do you know what? I was going to say something there. I've completely forgotten. I think it was about the Marvels. No, it's gone.
Yeah.
So in this episode, we get a Black Widow connection. Because Nick Fury's wife Priscilla, she mentions Dreykov, that she's been working on some mission against Ray Winstone's character from the Black Widow movie. We have heard some rumors that there is possibly some kind of Black Widow resurrection situation happening here. I don't know whether I believe those rumors. I feel like that's not true, but they have said, well, there's no superheroes in this. Natasha, not technically a superhero, so they wouldn't be cheating on their own code. We also saw extremists back from Iron Man 3. Tom, you also had another theory that you were talking to me about earlier. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Emilia Clarke's character, Gaia, because she obviously seems like she might be dead here by the end of the episode. Now, she could very well have protected herself by putting herself in that super Skrull machine and maybe given herself some of that extremist stuff to so that she wouldn't be shot in the street by Gravik. But you had another thought that I found quite intriguing.
Yeah, so I remember before Secret Invasion even came out, they were like, oh, she's playing Abigail Brand. She's going to lead S.W.O.R.D. She's going to be a mutant. It's a tie to X-Men. And I was like, okay, that theory stacks up. And then they reveal her as Talos's daughter, who's been in like 2 issues of the comics or something. And it's like, would you really waste someone like Emilia Clarke? But would you really waste her on such a small character? And I think what they've done is they'll kill Gaia off, and then we'll find her human form down in that bunker full of all the bodies. And it'll be Abigail Brand, and she'll work with Nick Fury's wife, and there'll be a whole S.W.O.R.D. thing. I think Guy is dead, but there's no way that Emilia Clarke's done after 3 episodes, unless they've done the world's worst trailer editing to try and throw us off. She appears in so many other scenes of the trailers. It would literally be impossible for her not to come back in some form. And I don't believe they've just resigned her to flashbacks for the rest of the season either.
Didn't they make a law recently as well that they couldn't lie in the trailers in terms of words or plotting, or are they not allowed to put things?
It was in terms of Ana de Armas, who was cut out. I can't remember what movie it was, but she's in the trailer and then she gets cut out, and psycho Ana de Armas fans took whatever production company to court, and they won for false advertising. So I don't know that there's full laws being rewritten, but it is something to consider.
Another win for the stands.
That's
Yeah.
that's right.
So at the end of this episode, Priscilla is called by somebody working with Gravik, we assume, and it's clearly Don Cheadle's voice on the line. So Rhodey is a Skrull. Any surprise from you guys on that one?
I am going to have to disagree.
Oh,
Just with your perception of reality.
okay. I mean, many
why-
do, Alec. Many do.
Why scroll? I mean, like, as far as we know, Nick Fury's not a Skrull, and it would not be unusual for him to field a phone call from Skrulls. I don't know. A Rhodey Skrull reveal is so obvious that I wouldn't be shocked if next week's twist is like the non-reveal that Rhodey is actually Rhodey. He's just been, as he kind of alluded to Fury, he's been in contact, or he's known about the Skrull for a long time. Maybe that extends to him being in contact with them. Maybe there's several factions within the Skrulls, even before this whole Gravik situation that Rhodey's been dealing with. So I'm not ready to declare secret Skrull yet.
Well, but she was like, I want to speak to Gravik. And he was like, well, you're talking to me. Like, so
Yeah.
that would mean he's working with Gravik. Is that where you're going with this, Alec?
I don't know where I'm going.
He just
I'm
knows
just
you're
saying.
wrong. That's all he's got.
I don't know what I'm talking about, but I am confident that I am right. No, my thing is I need to see Rhodey change into an actual green person before I do Rhodey Skrull confirmed. Like, one phone call's not doing it for me. I think there's wiggle room here. Maybe Gravik is doing this on behalf of somebody else. Maybe the US government's the bad guy. Maybe that's why Gravik is within Rhodey's employ or something. Maybe he's a patsy. I don't know. There are options. Please let me have options, because I've dug a real hole for myself here.
I like the idea of that Rhodey's big master plan, Skrull, assuming that he's a Skrull, if he's a Skrull, his whole master plan is to get the Avengers to come to Earth, because he was the one who's like, do you want to call in your friends? That idea that hypothetically wants Hulk to come into the battle, and then the Skrulls can get Hulk DNA, or they want to get some Thor DNA, and then they can swing hammers and stuff. Whether the writers are that smart and have brought that in, I don't really know. But going back to the whole Rhodey being a Skrull thing, there was that interesting tease where Fury said, nobody calls me Nick. And if you flash back to last week when they're having that amazing conversation, Rhodey calls him Nick. Whether, again, that's the writers being clever, or whether we're just going too far into theory territory and are kind of giving them too much credit, we'll have to wait and see. But either way, a Rhodey Skrull reveal, I'd be a bit like, meh. I said to Kirsten ages ago, I was like, I guarantee that Everett Ross will be a Skrull. And then there was that reveal, which then just brings up more questions about when was he swapped, who was in Wakanda Forever. And I don't know, for me, they've not done a big Skrull reveal that I care about. I don't care about Rhodey, and I don't care about Everett Ross.
No one does,
like,
Tom.
Yeah, I want someone big. Like, give me the Robert Downey Jr., like Tony Stark was a Skrull the entire time. Cool, great. That I would care about. Otherwise, it's just kind of B-tier characters that they're trying to make relevant. And it's like, who's next? Is it going to be Sharon Carter?
Right. And
There's a lot of people calling for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The comics were so good at that, the Secret Invasion, where they said that like these big people were Skrulls the whole time. It didn't really have many consequences because comics, but it was big and shocking and seemed like a big deal at least. But Everett Ross not exactly floating anyone's boat at the moment. Joe, who would delight you to see revealed as a Skrull?
I don't know that there's anybody out there that I would be like, they must be a Skrull, because the Secret Invasion comic book, it used, like you said, it didn't really come to the anywhere with this, but the idea was they were going to fix continuity for a while, but by revealing these guys were Skrulls. And so I think there was something with Hank Pym didn't they for a moment there be like the Hank Pym that slapped Janet was a Skrull? And they were going to take that part out. Like, there was that sort of idea, right? And it didn't end up coming to anything because they like you said, because comics. And so the MCU doesn't quite have that problem. I mean, there's little hiccups continuity wise, but they're relatively small. And the real problem the MCU has is that the actors are aging out and don't want to do these parts anymore. So there's nothing big in that way where like I need to see them fix this problem. Maybe the Sharon Carter one, which I wasn't so bothered by her being the power broker, but I know that's a big one where people are like, that's way out of character for her to make that switch. And so I could see that one fitting that, but outside of that, I don't know that there's any that I'm demanding to see. I just want them to use the scrolls that the characters that they have and the scroll reveals that they've done here. I want them to feel like something. It's I don't need Robert Downey Jr. to show up and to make it exciting for me. I need a scene that is actually as tense as they want me to believe it is,
It's funny with you guys talking about nobody calls me Nick as being the tell. I saw on Twitter earlier somebody had put pieced together like all different MCU characters calling him Nick over the years, and him being absolutely okay with it and not picking up on it at all.
It's the toast thing all over again.
What is the deal with the toast, Tom?
Like he said that he couldn't eat triangular toast or something. Right. He couldn't cut diagonally, so that was his way of proving he wasn't a skull. And then back in Avengers: Age of Ultron, he's there just eating a normal sandwich. So they can't even get it right between themselves. So what hope do we have of trying to figure it out?
But was that a toasted sandwich, Tom?
Good question. Yeah, I can't remember my Nick Fury toasted sandwiches, I'm afraid.
This was actually going to be a quite a short episode compared to our normal episodes, and it looks like it's going to be, because I'm honestly not sure what else we can talk about with this one. Not really a lot happened this week. I think probably episode 5 is going to be where stuff really kicks off, and then we should have quite a decent finale. But this has been quite a slow burn, and I'm not entirely sure that there's going to be any huge reveals or a huge amount of tension or action next week either. If this is a prequel, what would you like to see the consequences of this plot being, Tom, for the future of the MCU?
I think for me, it'd be cool to set up the whole sword thing. And yeah, like I'm going back to before, the scroll reveal things. Like you had your biggest scroll reveal, the Nick Fury one, was in Spider-Man. So that was an amazing reveal. And literally people are like, wow, this is amazing. This guy we've known for so long, he's a Skrull. They didn't waste it because it worked really well, but then to have spun that out into a TV series hasn't quite landed like it should do. And I don't think they're going to do Secret Invasion Season 2 or anything like that. If they planned it properly, they could have had it where you tease some of these big reveals and then had them. But instead, they've just sort of thrown it all into this 6-hour mini movie. And then moving forward, I'm like, where do they go from that? Is it going to lead into Captain America? I think that's what they'll do. I'm putting my money on it now, that at the end of the series, President Ritson will have died off in an explosion or will have been killed by the Skrulls, and Harrison Ford will step up and Thunderbolt Ross will be the president of the United States. And I think that then sets the scene for Captain America, Thunderbolts, and all these sort of covert Ashes of S.H.I.E.L.D. storylines that we still have.
So there are a million Skrulls on Earth, we've been told. What happens to them at the end of this series? Are they sticking around? How are they incorporated into the story going forward? Or are they just going to drop it and pretend it never happened in the way that they do?
I think that's the big worry. I'm kind of like, do fans care enough about what happens to them? They've not done a very good job about expanding the Skrulls. Like we were saying before, you've had all these character reveals of these people you already know being Skrulls, but you've not really learned much about the new Skrulls. So this whole race of people that you should be sympathetic about, like they've had this horrible plight. We know nothing about them. And if there's a million of them out there, I think fans are going to be like, okay, if the Skrulls just go back into the wild of Earth to be who they want to be, I don't think it'll really affect the MCU moving forward, which then kind of makes me question, why would people tune in every week to sort of see this thing that isn't necessarily going anywhere? I think it's kind of whether Samuel L. Jackson returns or not, I think will be interesting to see. I think this has done a good job of bookending Nick Fury and giving us more about him. But other than that, the wider MCU, it hasn't done a lot. But then that's a big complaint. People are kind of like, these shows are so fixed with being part of the wider MCU. It's nice to have something a bit more intimate, but then it's not worked. So it's a rock and a hard place, really.
And the way this was pitched was that like it was an event series, like it was bigger than the other ones in a way, almost like a Defenders on Netflix, although that was absolute pants as well. But like, it hasn't felt eventy so far, and I can only hope that they're leading to something big. I mean, you see in the trailers there's a lot of action that we haven't seen, like helicopters exploding and loads of people like fighting on the highway or whatever. So there is stuff to come. It just doesn't feel as momentous as perhaps we thought it was going to be, perhaps a bit more underwhelming. Lee has said that the bread in Age of Ultron was not toasted, Tom.
Nick Fury and his sandwiches. I stand corrected on his sandwiches. But going back to what you're saying about event series, my worry is they're going to do a WandaVision. Like, I loved WandaVision. I thought it was incredible. But that last episode kind of threw all the action into it, and it didn't really fit with the rest of it. And my worry is that with 3 episodes left, you're going to get the last episode where it's all explosions and helicopters and that stuff, which kind of kitchen sinks the whole thing and just sort of proves that you could have skipped the first 5 episodes and jumped to the end for whatever Secret Invasion inevitably sets up next.
Yeah, that's my fear too. That's where all the Super Skrull stuff is going, is that we're going to get, I mean, we saw clips of Groot Skrulls in the trailer. So we're going to watch Talos and Fury fight off Super Skrulls, which just feels wrong on the level of, I don't feel like the show has earned a big battle. And also from the perspective of a Fantastic Four fan, this is such a banal introduction to the Super Skrull. Like that's a over the top crazy cosmic character that you would expect from a Fantastic Four story, and kind of putting him here in this ground, or setting up that character in this grounded story just seems to be pulling the rug out from under him. I think it's doing a disservice to both this show as it's been and to the character that will hopefully become more important later on.
Would you like to see Super Skrulls become a thing going forward, Joe? Would you like to see some of these guys survive and become...
Yeah, not on Earth, though. I would be totally happy with Super Skrull showing up in the Marvels, and that's where I'm really kind of thrown about this movie's relationship, or the show's relationship, to the Marvels, because the little bit that we've seen that trailer, it's not just tonally that it feels different than what Secret Invasion has been. It's visually, I cannot see Kamala Khan bouncing around in this world. Maybe it would be a much better show if she was here. Like, I can't see how these two things are going to line up. And that's, on the one hand, okay for Secret Invasion to be in a different genre than the big movies are. But then if we're going to try to shoehorn all these things together, I don't know how that's going to fit. But if it's not going to fit, then how is this an event show? I mean, I feel like I'm back. You guys have all made good points, but I'm back to my original question is, what is this show? And I don't know that they know what it is.
We did so well with like WandaVision and Loki and stuff. And it's then that assumption that they're all going to be good. But as we've seen, with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they're not all going to be good. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Some people might love it.
That should be Standom's tagline. Marvel Standom. We're not all going to be good.
Ms. Marvel like divided people. And I think that no matter what way you look at it now, I don't think Secret Invasion will be remembered up there with the greats like Loki and WandaVision. And it just hammers home the saturation thing. And it's a problem that I think if Star Wars isn't careful, it can go down the same route too. Like, I think it's done really well with things like Andor and obviously Mandalorian. But then you have things like Book of Boba Fett. And I think people are going to continue asking with Marvel and Star Wars, do I need this show? Can my viewing of this franchise exist without it? And something like Secret Invasion, you don't need to watch it to... I doubt it's going to set up Secret Wars. So you kind of question, would I rather be doing something else with my hour, or would I rather be watching this?
It's also a problem with planning so far ahead. When, Kevin Feige is taking to Hall H or whatever, and he's telling us what's going to happen in like 2068. And by the time something like Secret Invasion comes along, the amount of like pressure on it to be of substance and good, and when it's almost been forgotten for what's coming next, is kind of counterintuitive in a way. Before, when it was the movies, perhaps they could have done that, and they did do it successfully, sort of planning the next couple ahead. But like this is so many things now, and as they're coming along, the more that they're disappointing or underwhelming, the more it seems to sort of dilute the brand or whatever, and dilute the excitement for whatever comes next. I don't know how they solve it, honestly. They have tried to push stuff back, it seems, and maybe dial down their plans a little bit. There's obviously the Kang situation, which we don't know how that's going to turn out at the moment, but I can't see them saying anything about it until Loki season 2 has streamed and they haven't had to address it in any way. And then they'll probably be forced to say something at some point. But yeah, it's a real tough situation. Like, I'm sure Kevin Feige is not crying himself to sleep over it on a big pile of money. I'm sure he's absolutely fine. But it does seem like they are unsure of how to tie all these things together. And it continues to be a bit of an issue. I'm saying that after I enjoyed this episode just fine and like had a really good time watching Nick and Talos just talking in a car for like 10 minutes. But yeah, I think a lot of people aren't me and aren't just excited by two old lads in a car having a chinwag, you know. Probably want some more explosions and some more CGI. I think that might be us done for this episode, unless you guys have any other thoughts.
How did you guys feel when Fury called an English breakfast dog food?
It didn't look great.
It didn't look like a good one, but I felt that was fair, actually, Alec. I think that our food is terrible.
That toast was about 3 levels too cooked.
Thank you very much, Tom, for joining us this week. It was great to finally meet you after working with you for so long. And thank you, Joe, for stopping by again. Obviously, I'll see you in a few hours, you know. We'll get back together in a few. Alec, have a good evening. That's it for this week's Marvel Standom. Thank you all for watching and putting up with me while Mike's away. He will probably be back next week, probably. Make sure you're subscribing to us wherever you're listening right now. Don't forget to check out our web home of denofgeek.com, where you can find all our Marvel coverage. Drop us a line and let us know your burning questions and what you would like us to cover in upcoming episodes. We're Marvel Standom on Twitter and Instagram. If you came in late, you'll be able to watch this entire episode on denofgeek.com or our YouTube home, Den of Geek US. Don't forget, you can check out past episodes there and also wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to our special guests, Joe George and Tom Chapman. Thank you to Andrew Halley, the best producer in any corner of the multiverse. Thanks to Den of Geek social media coordinator Lee Parham for keeping everyone in line in the comments, although you're fairly quiet tonight. Go follow our TikTok, Den of Geek TV, where Lee is doing incredible work. A special shout out to Michael R. for making the podcast version of this show all it can be. And most of all, thank you for watching, listening, following, and subscribing. Until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.